Throughout our life, each of us will have encounters with greatness. We see greatness in God's creation like the mountain peaks reaching to the sky or the ocean wrapping around us in endless view. Maybe we read great books or watch great movies. We meet great people. We face great obstacles. Sometimes, oh sometimes, we even feel like we get the opportunity to accomplish great things. The internet allows us to keep up to date on the greatest our world has to offer. There is something inside of us as humans that is drawn to greatness, but we risk setting the bar of true greatness too low. There is one who truly is the greatest. May we see him in his glory. For all this world has to offer, Jesus is greater.
So one Saturday night, my family, every year we'd drive from Grand Rapids to Detroit, go to a baseball game, and then come home in time for Sunday. So Saturday night, we're driving home. It was dark. It's later at night. And I was probably 6 or 7 at the time. And we're driving down the road on the highway, and then the sky lit up. Is this fireball that went from one end of the sky all the way to the other, and it just lit the whole sky up, and it was the first meteor I remember seeing. It was incredible. It just caught your eye. There's no way you could not look and see and be amazed at what was going on. And my dad said, I think it landed in Canada. I don't know why. I think, I'm not going to say that. It was incredible, this fireball. It just lit everything up. And I realized that, you know what? When something shines brightly in the middle of the darkness, we're drawn to it, right? It doesn't matter if it's a shiny metal object. I remember as a kid when I'd be sitting in class bored, and all of a sudden the light would shine off the watch, and all of a sudden you start playing. Where can this thing shine, right? Our eyes get caught to those kind of things. Things that are shiny, things that are bright. Today we're going to be talking about the radiance of Jesus. Just a brief summary of what we talked about last week, an introduction to the book. The authorship of Hebrews is unknown. Some think Paul, some think Apollos, some think Priscilla, some think Barnabas. There's a lot of thinking, but no certainty. The audience isn't specific. It's not a specific church like the church at Ephesus or the church at Colossae, but it's to all Christians in the known world at the time, mainly to Jewish Christians. That's why the name of the book is Hebrews. But to Jewish Christians, because there's so much talked about, the Old Testament is in this book, the sacrifices, the imagery, the characters. Something that those Hebrew Christians would grab a hold of emotionally and feel attached to. It's so important. The central purpose of Hebrews is to exhort the believers to not go back to the old way, the old sacrificial system, to not give in to the pressures of the people around them, because they were being pressured to not to go to the new covenant, but to stay with the old, and they were being pushed back into that. And the writer of Hebrews is saying, don't fall to it. Don't go back to the old way, the laws of Moses, because Jesus is greater. Jesus is greater than Abraham. Jesus is greater than Moses. Jesus is greater than the law. Jesus is greater. The Testaments, the Old Testament and the New Testament, they're brought together through Jesus. And it's because of that truth that no one and nothing will ever be better than Jesus. So at the heart of Christianity is this knowledge that the living God created everything. He continues to speak. He continues to have relationship with us, with people, with his creation, with men and women. The Old Testament shows that God is working through angels and prophets, through signs and wonders, through his written word, through the Torah, all of that he gave to Moses. There's this old part that was there, the old covenant, the old way of doing things. And it's why the author starts with this statement. So in Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, he starts with the past. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways, but in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he also made the universe. Right at the very beginning, the writer of Hebrews lays the whole reason for these. It's basically this: the old is replaced. The old is done. The old is gone away. The old is replaced with something new. Now, even with very general words like through our ancestors, through the prophets, these are words that those readers would be emotionally attached to. When he was talking about ancestors, the first place they're going to go is Abraham and Moses and Elijah and these names of people that we know and are God-fearing people. And emotionally, these were their ancestors. These are the people that they would love. These were the people they wanted to follow. It was Moses that wrote this law, and so Moses was revered, and they would go in their mind to these people. And the writer of Hebrews is basically saying, that's the old stuff. There's something better now. There's a new sheriff in town. There's a new head. There's a new way of doing things. And he's basically saying, Jesus, this Son of God, isn't just someone who got added on to the list of Abraham and Moses and David, and now there's Jesus. He's not an add-on. He's a replacement. He's a replacement. There is no one equal. And why is there no one equal? That's what we're going to go into right now. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. Without asking the question, who is Jesus, the author answers it. He says this: the Son of God is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. And after he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven. The Son of God is the radiance of God's glory in the exact representation. Radiance is this idea of shining brightly. It's what was happening when this meteor was going through this dark sky. It was radiant. But a better example of that is the sun. The sun is sending out rays. Radiance is the brightness, the shining brightness that comes from within and shines forward and shines out. The ray of the sun has all the character, all the pieces, all the parts of the sun, because the ray comes forth from the sun. It's not a reflection. It's a part of the sun, actually. It's not outside. I think Ezekiel really gives us a couple of good pictures of radiance when he talks about it, actually. In Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 28, he says this: like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him. This appearance of a rainbow like a cloud on a rainy day. We in Vancouver, we know what rainy days are like, right? We do. They're dark, they're gloomy, 100 mils of rain, it's just like, oh my stars. And yet, you imagine what it's like when the sun is shining in the midst of that dark, awful, gloomy feeling? That's what he's talking about here. And there are times when it's raining and yet the sun is shining. I wonder, how can that happen? It doesn't seem like there's a cloud up there, but there is. This radiance in the middle of the gloom and the dark is real, and it makes a difference. It changes our perspective of the world. Ezekiel 10, chapter 10, verse 4 says, "Then the glory of the Lord rose from above the cherubim and moved to the threshold of the temple. The cloud filled the temple, and the court was full of the radiance of the glory of God." It was filled with the radiance, with the brightness, with the shining. And where did that shining come from? The same thing that it says in Hebrews. From the glory of God, it filled the room. Comes from within and it goes out. To say that the sun is the radiance is saying that the sun isn't from outside of God. The writer is saying that this sun is God. And then he adds a second descriptor. Just in case the readers didn't get this idea that this is the Son of God, let me say it in one more way. He says, the exact representation. That idea of representation is a reproduction or exact copy. Some translations say an exact impression, like a seal or a stamp. To take that sun ray analogy another step, the sun isn't, this ray is not a reflection, as I said, it is the sun. It's not just something that you see in a mirror, isn't that bright? It comes from within, and so this exact representation came from within God because He is God. He's the real thing. So who is the Son? Who is Jesus? This writer is saying He is God. And don't miss it. Don't miss it. Jesus is God. Jesus replaces all of those old past things. The ancestors and the prophets, He fulfills that and replaces that old covenant. And how does He do it? What has Jesus done that makes Him greater? What has He done? In this verse, in verse 4, or in 3 and 4, he says a few things. First of all, what Jesus has done that makes Him greater than the ancestors and the prophets and even the law. Number one, He's involved in making the universe. It says, in these last days He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed heir all things, and through whom He also made the universe. Now, when we read universe, we think creation. We think all the things that were made in Genesis chapter 1. We think of this creation that He made, and there is a part of that here, but it also means ages. The literal word is ages. In other words, the times. He created the times and the ages, and He oversees all of that, not just what we see physically, but all the ages of time. He created time itself. Moses didn't create anything. Abraham didn't create anything. King David didn't create anything. The law couldn't even make them perfect in God's eye. Only Jesus could. And here he's saying Jesus was there through all time and all ages. Not only that, it says He sustains all things, sustaining all things by His powerful word. Sustains is this ability to carry the ages forward. In other words, towards something. It's not just holding it, not sustaining like, how long can I hold my hand up here? If I put a weight on it, it'd be a lot less time, right? Not just holding something up, but this idea here is sustaining, moving forward a plan. A plan that He has, a plan that can make it happen. It's not just static, it's dynamic. It's moving. It's not just holding something in place. It's the ability not just to make the plan, but to make the plan happen. a lot of us plan. A lot of us think, well, it's going to go this way, and then something changes that we don't have control over, and we can't make it happen. The furnaces are a perfect example. You look at the lights that are on today, we have no idea why they're not working. We don't know. We can't find it, so we get to call an electrician and say, come rescue us. It wasn't the plan this morning, and I came in and I said, well, that's nice ambient lighting. And Jared says, well, they're not working. It's just the way it is. But Jesus doesn't have that. There's no surprises. He has the ability to make it happen, and that makes him greater than anything in the past and anything that we can think of. It's greater. Number 3 is he purifies sin. Hebrews 3:1, after he's provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. This is the heart of the matter of the book of Hebrews. Why did Jesus come? To purify us from sin. The very Son of God came to deal with our biggest problem, with man's biggest problem, and our biggest problem is sin. Not being in relationship with the Father because we do things wrong. As a priest, Jesus' priestly work was the final sacrifice that put sin away. Last week I said one and done. One sacrifice paid for all of my sin, all of your sin, all of our sin for all time. I don't really have time to walk through all the ways that the book of Hebrews addresses what Jesus did. These are some of the words. He put away, annulled, brought redemption, he bore, sacrificed. It's like painting a picture. All these words kind of paint a picture with every color that you can think of so that every way that sin needs to be dealt with, Jesus did. It wasn't just part way. It wasn't just some of it, but it was in every way. Jesus accomplished in every angle salvation. And that's why we turn to him. Whatever had to be done to sin and with sin, Jesus did it. And when he did it, he did this. He sat down. It's done. On the cross, he said, it is finished. He sat down, it says, at the right hand of God. I watching some of the Olympics this week and the snowboarding half pipe. Chloe Kim. It was pretty incredible what she had done. And she, by the time came down at the end of her run, she was so satisfied, so exuberant, and so overwhelmed and exhausted that when she got done at the end, she just sat down. It was done. It was finished. It was over. She was overwhelmed. She fell to her knees. And Jesus is sitting in that seat of honor next to God. It's finished. It's over. Because he paid for our sin. He purified us. We look perfect before God the Father, not because we are, but because of what Jesus has done. We're in relationship with God, not because we deserve it or have been able to do anything to get it, but it's because of what Jesus has done, because Jesus is greater. And then the fourth thing is he receives authority. It says heir of all things. It says powerful word, right hand and superior. Hebrews chapter 1 verse 4. So he became so much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. Superior. All these words speak about authority. The old system and the old covenant, they've been dealt with. Everything that they could offer fell short. Even though these Hebrews held them up as awesome, and they are awesome, but they couldn't accomplish what really needed to be done, and that is the forgiveness of our sins. Abraham, Moses, the prophets, King David, the Torah, none of that had final authority. But God has final authority. God has the authority to judge. He has the authority to give mercy. He has that authority, and Jesus is that authority that radiates the exact representation of God, the Son, did this for us. All of this is what made Jesus greater. In those first 4 verses of Hebrews, the central issue of Christianity is addressed. Who is Jesus and what he has done? If you ever say, I'm not sure, or people are wondering, no, so who's Jesus? Just take them to the first 4 verses of Hebrews. It just takes 4 verses and say, this is who he is. This is what he's done. If these words were jewelry, they would sparkle and shine. They should get our attention. They should draw us. They should say, hey, where are my eyes going? Not all over the place, but to this, to who Jesus is, to what he's done, to draw our attention to that. They were meant to be an emotional pull on the hearts of the reader. Are our hearts emotionally pulled to the Savior? Are they moved to him? Not just a logical head knowledge and intellectual thing. We can give affirmation without following. We can say, yeah, this is great. This is a good book. Those are nice words. Let's try and live it. But that's not what it's about. It's about, does God have our hearts? Does God have all of us? Are our hearts steered by the radiance of Jesus? But it's like the infomercials, and there's still more. There's still more. Hebrews pictures the Son as active in creation, then is continuing his interest in the world that he loves and bearing it onwards, fulfilling his plan. Jesus, as God, has done all that he is. He has all power. He has all authority. He's at work. And the Father says, these things will perish, and yet you will remain without end. He isn't done doing his work just because these books are written. Jesus is still at work in our lives. He is still moving forward, and he is always, always moving creation to fulfill his plan. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. It says, he also says, in the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will roll them up like a robe. Like a garment, they will be changed, but you remain the same, and your years will never end. Being greater is not something that Jesus just said, I need to work a way to do that. He is. And why is it important to grasp that Jesus is greater than angels or these people of faith who came before? Because Jesus wants to grab our hearts and transform our being. He knows that we also get pulled to going back to what was comfortable, to our old nature, our sin nature, and we get pulled back to that. And when we see who Jesus is in that radiance and we get pulled forward, we have that attention of ours. Is our heart moved too? Because if our hearts aren't moved, we'll just keep going back and forth. But as our hearts are transformed and our minds are transformed to see Jesus for who he is, that pull back to the old is always there, but not as strong. And that's what Hebrews is written about. Don't go back to the old ways, even though people around you are pressuring you and there's peer pressure to do this or to do that. He's saying, no, don't go back. Let your heart move forward. To move forward. I think it's really important. And Jesus is that exact representation. And we need to take his power and his authority, all of it, not just the parts that we want to pick and choose. When we pick and choose and say, well, I'll follow this and not that, to not follow the principles and have that desire to follow the principles, then we start thinking we're God. We can do what we want, and yet God will still be there. It's like, no, we need to follow him as completely as possible and keep working toward that. We could play a little game, say like, I know Jesus said this, but. Jesus said, love my enemies, but. There's some enemies out there that I'm not sure about. We make space. Jesus said, be a peacemaker. And we say, but. Jesus said, in humility, value others above yourselves. And we say, but what about me? I like comfort. I don't know what your Jesus said this and you say but is. But think about that. Where are you not letting Jesus be greater? Jesus is the meteor flying through the dark sky, and the question is, as you see who Jesus is and what he's done, are you being drawn back to your past or being moved forward for him? Are you being drawn back to those comfortable old places? Are you saying, I don't want that. I want to move forward. Jesus is fully God. He is radiant in God's glory. Does Jesus have your attention? Not just when you're here on Sunday morning or when you're online, but does Jesus have your attention? Are you looking to the Son for power and authority to deal with life's issues? Or are you trying to do it on your own? Are you looking to Jesus to deal with sin completely? In other words, is he the ray of sun in your life? Because Jesus is always greater.
As we respond.